It's September 18th, 1993. The last Russian troops leave Poland after the country had once again become a liberal democracy in the elections 2 years earlier. Poland was the first Eastern European country to leave the Soviet bloc, even while knowing all too well what terrors Russia were capable of committing against anyone who wanted to leave. The once proud Polish military who fought valiantly against both Germany and the Soviet Union during World War II, and was largely decimated by Stalin and his regime in the Katyn massacre, lies completely ruined. They've got old Soviet equipment, no reasonable command structure, and their troops are nowhere near the standard that the Polish army would demand in 1935, or in the glory days of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. 37 years of corrupt communist rule had gutted the proud Polish fighting spirit, one which saw Polish airmen perform among the best out of all RAF pilots during World War II in their infamous 303 squadron, including the highest tally during the Battle of Britain. Things were about to change course, fast. 30 years later, Poland has completely reversed the picture and are fast becoming NATO's #1 power in Europe, making Poland's historical enemy, Russia, think twice about the typical saber rattling and provocation customary to the very nature of Putin's regime. So how did Poland do it? Let's look at Poland's transition from a poor, newly independent state in 1991 to one of the most potent military forces in the world in 2024. Poland always had one of the most strategic positions in Europe and have been placed to some of the worst battles throughout world history. Sitting at the crossroads between the Russian Empire, Germany, and Austria-Hungary meant that Poland nearly always had to fight for its freedom. At the greatest extent, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth beat Russia so badly in battle that it was one of only 2 forces in history to occupy Moscow, with the other being the Mongols. Poles know all too well what happens to its country if it is occupied. During World War II, a staggering 17% of its pre-war population became casualties to both German and Russian aggression, the highest loss out of the pre-war population of any country, with a large part of these losses coming in the civilian population and through indiscriminate targeting of civilians. With Poland joining NATO in 1999, the democratic world had finally managed to stop this never-ending cycle of violence for Poland by putting concrete force and diplomatic assurances behind the newly independent country. And Poland had at the same time helped stop any encroachment from the more typical authoritarian powers that reside on its eastern border. For Europe as a whole, Poland joining NATO was likely the biggest political achievement of the latter part of the 90s, with a fiercely independent people now being a stopgap against NATO's historical enemy to the east, a people that in their lifetime had suffered the consequences of Russian aggression and would do everything in their power to stop it happening again. While many nations within NATO can be said to have been coasting along in the alliance under the US's protective wings until recently, Poland is most definitely not one of the freeloaders. Poland spends well over 3.9% of their annual GDP on their military, with a stated aim of over 4.65%, which puts them as the single biggest military spender per GDP in NATO, 0.4% above the United States. This trend is not unique to Poland, and many of the countries surrounding them who have faced similar repression by Russia also spend well over the 2% stated goal within NATO. So how is this increased spending being received within NATO? The US have applauded the move and have shifted some of their focus away from the typical European great powers to the now ascending Poland. NATO bases are naturally being built and reinforced in Poland as a response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but this is also likely a pat on the back from the alliance in response to how seriously Poland takes carrying their load within the organization. It isn't just the amount of GDP and money spent on the military which have gone up since those early independent days of the 1990s, but also the quality of both the enlisted soldiers and equipment. While many countries struggled with economic downturns and fluctuating markets since the financial crises in 2008, the post-COVID recession, and growing inflation, Poland is one of the only countries in Europe which has seen steady growth since the end of the Soviet era in 1989, with the GDP for the average Pole rising by a staggering 130% in the same period. The way the Polish economy is powering ahead, Poland will likely break top 20 of the world's largest economies by 2030, surpassing either Switzerland, Turkey, or the Netherlands, who are above them on the list. While Poles have long sought work elsewhere in the European Union, the tables have now turned. Poles are returning home in numbers never before seen, powering the Polish economy even more, helped by some very positive policies by the Polish government, who offer a lower taxation to previously migrated Poles when they return home to Poland. All of this economic success means that Poland have invested heavily in its armed forces. It's more than doubled its active military personnel to over 300,000, and have gone from using Soviet-made weaponry to some of the most advanced military systems in the world. In example, Poland has invested extremely heavily in its air fleet. They've got 32 F-35s on order from the US, and have already started taking delivery of their own variant of the South Korean T-50, with an expected total of over 100 extremely modern fighter aircraft being in service in the Polish Air Force by 2028. This will also allow Poland to support its close ally Ukraine by sending their older Soviet variant aircraft there. The buck doesn't stop there for the Polish Air Force, and Poland is also taking delivery of at least 180 AH-54 Apache helicopters from the United States, a hyper-modern aerial surveillance and control aircraft from Sweden, 24 Bayraktar TB2 from Turkey, and an unspecified number of Reaper drones from the US. It is also currently discussing buying a further 32 air dominance fighters from either the US or Europe. If you discount the older Soviet fighter aircraft Poland possesses, which they'll likely donate to Ukraine once the F-35s arrive, the Polish Air Force will have 160 capable operational fighter jets, with the vast majority of those being top of the line. To compare this with some other big European NATO allies, we can see that Poland will have roughly the same amount of modern fighter jets as some of the larger European NATO nations, with a much smaller population pool than all four counterparts. When it comes to armored equipment, the spending is also extensive. While Poland already has a large fleet of capable modern Leopard 2s at its disposal of at least 250 tanks, it has also acquired or ordered at least 1,000 K2 Black Panthers from South Korea, and a further 300+ Abrams variants from the US. As with the fighter jets, the figures are even more skewed towards Poland's armored capability when you compare it to other NATO nations in Europe. Poland will have a total of over 1,000 more modern main battle tanks than France, and the picture is even better against Italy, the UK, and Germany. Poland also produced their own variants of IFVs called the Borsuk and Rosomak, which will number around 1,300 when all units are delivered. As we've seen in Ukraine, artillery along with drones are the kings of the battlefield. Poland isn't lagging behind here either, and have purchased a total of at least 800 K9 Thunder SPGs and around 300 Chunmoo GMLRS systems from South Korea, and an additional 500 HIMARS systems from the US, to go with their already very capable and battle-tested Krab SPG and various older systems. This will ensure that Poland overtakes Finland as the single largest artillery arsenal in Europe when everything is delivered, and quite frankly means Poland blows all major European powers in NATO out of the water with the amount of modern heavy self-propelled guns they have at their disposal. Military kit is important, but it is the boots on the ground that are needed to operate it. While the state of the average soldier in the Polish army in 1991 was anything but good, it is now total role reversal. NCOs are trained to the rigorous standards of NATO and are often used as instructors by NATO elsewhere. Poland's special forces are known to be extremely capable, and people in Poland actually aspire to work for the armed forces. Through its many programs, the Armed Forces of Poland offers further education, great pay, and a chance for young people to earn valuable experience. It is a model worth replicating in other Western countries where recruitment for the armed forces is falling. One of the primary reasons for the increase in spending and rearmament is Poland's proximity to Russia's Kaliningrad enclave. It is estimated that around 100,000 Russian soldiers are stationed there, although these numbers may vary due to Russia reallocating much of its military manpower to Ukraine. Poland would likely need to secure the Suwalki Gap, an 80-kilometer land corridor between Kaliningrad and Belarus, to ensure military aid could reach the Baltic NATO countries in the event of a war. While the terrain within the roughly 1-kilometer strip of land between Poland and Lithuania is mainly forested, the surrounding areas are predominantly open farmland. The significant increase in spending on modern tanks is likely a countermeasure against potential aggression in this region, as tanks would be particularly effective in the terrain around Suwalki. In conclusion, Poland will likely be one of the strongest military powers in Europe by 2030. It is spending more money than any other NATO nation when you look at GDP on its defense, and will have more hard power than anyone in Europe if you discount nuclear arms. It is a testament to the infamous Polish defiance that we saw during World War II, and it leading the way out of communist dictatorship in 1989 before any other nation. Do you think Poland will be considered a regional power in Europe by 2030? Let me know in the comments below.